sitting drinking coffee and fiddling with his cell phone, Pedro hears the doorbell ring and scream. He gets up to open the door. When he opens it, he greets the woman saying hi, and she replies back. She informs him that her name is Aline and that it was the new diarist that Donna Sibylle had hired. He sends her in and informs her that he has just remembered that his wife has hired a helper and tells Aline to make herself comfortable. Aline agrees and asks if you work there. He says yes, because he works at home office using his cell phone, having a coffee, doing some things on the computer. The diarist informs Pedro that she had brought an outfit to change and asked where she could be changing. Pedro informs her that at the end of the corridor she had a room and that she could make herself comfortable. Aline apologizes, thanking him, and follows the indicated path to change. When she gets to the room, she opens the door and starts looking in the mirror, running her hand through her hair, and starts taking off her pants to put on shorts, changing her shirt, and when she's ready she admires herself in the mirror and starts to apply lipstick. Then that finishes. Aline ties an apron and arranges her hair to the side and leaves the room to start work. Arriving in the kitchen, she finds Pedro still drinking his coffee and using his cell phone and catches her attention, who had already changed his clothes and was about to start cleaning while he looked at the way she was dressed. The maid asks if he had any preference for where to start. Pedro looks at her again and asks if she was going to work, but stops in the middle of the question, unable to finish talking. Pedro changes the subject, asking how did her work. Aline replies that she had cases that started in the kitchen, living room, but it depended and it was at his discretion. He says he's already in the kitchen finishing up some things. She could start working there in the living room. The housekeeper turns and leaves the kitchen, not noticing her boss's displeased look. After some time, when she was sweeping the room and her boss was sitting in front of the bed working on the computer, Aline asks to talk to Pedro. What if it wasn't too hot today? Pedro confirms, saying it was too much, but continues to work without looking at her and adds that sincerely, even though it was hot, he wouldn't give up his coffee. The diarist, seeing an opportunity for conversation, asks him if he likes coffee, and he replies that he likes it too much. Aline says that she was repairing that big bed and tells Pedro that it was very beautiful. He, without realizing it, answers yes, and that he had bought it about 4 to 5 months ago, and says that the bed was the most comfortable king. The helper nods, confirming that he had understood, and continues to sweep, not seeing that he is uncomfortable with the view she displays. Aline then asks if his wife usually travels like this always. Pedro answers that yes, Sibylle usually travels every week, like twice a week. She asks him if this time his wife would take too long. Pedro replies that probably in 2 days his wife would be back, and uncomfortable with her exhibition, he excuses himself, saying he would solve something. Later, Aline takes her cell phone to talk to her friend, sending an audio about that she had started to work in a house and that she had to see her boss, as he was a cat, and explains that his wife was only traveling, and Aline talks that he would have to control himself by saying goodbye to go back to work. When she got back to the room she was directed to at the beginning, she takes off her apron and folds it and puts it in her bag. Meanwhile, Pedro, stressed with the diarist, sees that she didn't close the door of the room he had just entered. He leaves the computer on the couch and gets up and walks there to close the door. When he closes it, he goes back to the living room and passes his hands through her hair and sighs, shaking her head, and goes back to work, leaving that aside. A few minutes later, Aline leaves the room already changed with the same clothes she came in, calling her boss, saying that she had already given her time. He says good then, but Aline says that she had loved working there for Pedro today and that she had found the cleaning very easy and hoped he would have liked it. Uncomfortable with her blatant flirtation, he says he's going to open the door for her as he gets up. The assistant tells him to be calm because tomorrow at 9 she would be there again, and goes ahead to the exit path. When Pedro opens the door, she thanks him and says goodbye, saying see you tomorrow. Closing the door, he sighs and goes back to work. Later on the phone to Pedro, he talks to his wife asking if everything was okay there, and that he was actually calling to talk about the new helper Aline, saying that he didn't think she would like her very much, and he explains that Aline wore some clothes a little short, and from what he was seeing he was sure his wife wouldn't like her, and says the helper said she'd come again tomorrow. Pedro says that Aline does different things, and that even when it comes to cleaning he had nothing to complain about because she cleaned well, but she had a kind of strange attitude. When his wife says something on the other end of the line, Pedro agrees, and says goodbye to his wife, sending a kiss and saying goodbye. The other day, while Aline is sweeping the living room rug, and her boss is sitting on the couch again working, she sees that Aline is wearing a short outfit. He catches Aline's attention by asking if she only came to work in those clothes, and if she didn't have pants to wear at her house, right? Aline replies, well, sir, Pedro ended up leaving late today, and that when she was on the bus, she realized that she hadn't put her clothes on and that she had to go back to get her. She wouldn't be able to get there today. The helper sighs and says he was a little messy, and shows where the slipper was bending down to pick it up and asks where could she keep it. Pedro runs his hand through his hair and says that she could put it in the room for him, please. Aline confirms that she will put it on and leaves the room without noticing the face her boss makes at her when she leaves. After some time, while cleaning the bookshelf, the assistant turns around and says that she kept looking at Pedro working on the computer and asked if he always worked that way at home, if he didn't leave the house to work. Pedro replies that not always, and that it was now that he started working from the home office. Then he stayed indoors, and it has been more than a year. Aline moves to clean the couch and asks her boss if he likes it. He says yes, because it was nice to stay home in comfort. The assistant calls him and says that today's cleaning is almost done, and asks if she could pick up that glass. Pedro says yes and lets her take it. Aline goes over him and excuses himself, taking the glass. When she finished pulling the glass, the assistant spills the water on her boss's shoulder on purpose. He is startled by the water in him and asks what that was. The assistant pretends to be sorry, apologizing to her boss, and starts cleaning him with the cloth and turns around with the intention of sitting on her lap. Pedro says that Dona Aline, I'm married, showing her ring. Aline says that asking if he didn't like what he was seeing. Pedro responds negatively and talks about her lack of respect and asks why she did that. The assistant says that it was unintentional and asks for forgiveness, as she had not done anything wrong and would only dry it. Her boss denies it and asks her to do the following: take her things and leave, as she had crossed the line. Aline begs, telling her not to do that to her, that she needed that job, but Pedro denies it, saying that she didn't need to, because if she really needed to, she wouldn't do that, and asks her to excuse herself from there. She apologizes once again and says she is very embarrassed and asks for forgiveness, leaving the room. Minutes later, the helper comes back and asks for forgiveness, saying that she was very clumsy and that she was just trying to dry him. Pedro replies that everything is fine and goes to open the door for her to leave. When she is leaving, he takes her bag and leaves. Still apologizing, he closes the door and snorts. Is that you? Do you think there are still men like me? Leave it in the comments.